Jai Shri Radhe. So Vaishnav Anko Jai Shri Krishna. Continuing with our Vartas of the 252 Vaishnava disciples of Sri Gosaiji. Today, Varta on day 198. It is Varta 186, the story of a scribe from Surat who kept his earthenware pot with him even after using it to cook. Bhav Prakash. This is a devotee of Tamasi disposition. In the eternal Leela, his name is Vraja, who manifests from Ranga and is thus the personification of her divine loving sentiment. He was born into a family of scribes in Surat. He was of a renounced nature from childhood. When he was 14, Sri Gosaiji visited Surat. As soon as the boy saw him, he knew that he should take shelter in Sri Gosaiji, and he straightway requested him to accept him as a disciple. Sri Gosaiji recognized that he was a divine soul and initiated him with the Lord's name and Brahmasambandh. The scribe accompanied Sri Gosaiji to Gokul and then to Gopalpur, Jatipura. There he had the sight of Sri Govardhanaji, and from there he set off on a tour of Vraja. He became very happy thereby and annually came to Gokul for a Vrajayatra. Part 1. This Vaishnava scribe from Surat came to Gokul every year and celebrated the spring festival and the Lord's birthday there. Then he would go out on a tour of the whole of Vraj. One time he arrived in Kamwan where he bought an earthenware cookware pot which he used to cook dal. He then prepared the batis and offered them to the Lord. He poured the dal into a smaller bowl for this purpose. Then he washed the earthenware pot, rubbed a layer of vrajraj over it, wrapped it in a blanket, and hung it on a tree, while he accepted back the offering as prasad and partook of the same. Then he donned his clothes and moved on from there. When he had completed his journey, he would go back to Surat, taking the pot with him, and always cooked his dal in it. Once the Vaishnava scribe came to Gokul. He bowed to Sri Gosaiji, who asked him, "O Vaishnava, you come here every year, don't you?" The Vaishnava replied, "O Maharaj, yes, I do come every year, with your blessings. I take part in the celebration for the Sri Krishna's birthday and swing festival. Then I attend the Anukut festival before returning home. When I go back, I earn 5 rupees and then come back again." Another Vaishnava piped up, "O Maharaj, he is a very good Vaishnava, but he does something very inappropriate." Sri Gosaiji inquired, "What exactly does he do that it is not right?" The Vaishnava replied, "He carries an earthenware pot with him as he comes in and goes. He always uses the pot to cook his dal in." Sri Gosaiji asked the scribe, "Oh, is this really true?" The scribe admitted that he did. Sri Gosaiji told him, "This is not acceptable in this path." The Vaishnavas answered, "O Maharaj, my pot is made from the dust of Vraj. That pot makes it equivalent to a vessel of gold. For me to come and go to Vraj every year takes at least the 5 rupees that I earn. Rather than spending that on a new pot, I offered those 5 rupees worth of supplies to Srinathji. The pot is made of dust of Vraj. Therefore, however, I shall do as my pot is made of the dust of Vraja alone. However, I shall do as you instruct." Sri Gosaiji then spoke to the Vaishnava, "Do not do as he does. Do not attempt to copy his actions, but emulate his divine loving sentiment, and please don't say a word to him." Sri Gosaiji was very impressed with the scribe's words and continued to speak about him. "See, he comes to Braj every single year. In this he is most fortunate. Just look at his blessed mood of love for the dust of Vraj. This you should learn from him. Instead of buying a new pot every year, he saves the 5 rupees and buys supplies for Srinathji. He is a very accomplished Vaishnava." He praised the Vaishnava scribe profusely. All the Vaishnavas were happy to realize that he was indeed a divine soul. Bhav Prakash. The moral of this tale is that Vraja is a divine realm. The devotees who truly recognize this importance of the dust of Vraja never encounter any obstacles in their devotional practices. Vaishnavas who just copy another's actions without understanding the real meaning of such actions are actually committing an offence and can end up turning their face away from the Lord. Vaishnavas should never judge the behaviour of other Bhagavadiya Vaishnavas. Thus concludes Varta 186, the story of that Vaishnava scribe from Surat who kept his earthenware pot with him even after cooking in it. He received Sri Gosaiji's great grace and was an accomplished Vaishnava. There is no end to his tale. Varta 186, the story of one merchant who offered a coconut to Bhairav, Bhav Prakash. This is a devotee of Tamasi disposition. In the eternal Leela, his name is Sundari, who manifests from Sridham and is thus a personification of their divine loving sentiment. He was born into a family of Vaishnavas in Gujarat. His parents died when he was 18. He was alone, and he travelled to Dwarkaji to have the holy sight of Sri Ranchor Lalji. At that moment, Sri Gosaiji was staying in Dwarkaji, and this merchant caught sight of him and thereby had the wish of becoming his disciple. He approached Sri Gosaiji and asked him to accept him into his Seva. Sri Gosaiji asked him if he was all alone, and he replied, yes, he was. My parents have recently died, and I am alone, so please let me serve you in some way. Sri Gosaiji granted him the Brahma Sambandha initiation and took him into his entourage. He stayed close to Sri Gosaiji and served him. Some time after Sri Gosaiji travelled from Dwarkaji to Gokul, the merchant went with him. He had the holy sight of Gokul, and then Sri Gosaiji took him with him to have the holy sight of Sri Govardhanaji. They travelled to Gopalpur, Jetipura. Sri Gosaiji instructed him to stay there to serve Sri Govardhanaji. From that day he was engaged in such seva. Sometimes he fetched supplies and he did whatever seva that he required. Part 1. One day this merchant Vaishnava travelled from Sri Gosaiji to Agra. 2 other Vaishnavas accompanied him. They had filled up their entire wagons with supplies and were on their way when the wagons came to a sudden halt. The Vaishnava merchant asked a bystander why the wagon was ground to a halt. That person explained, there is a part manifestation of Shiva, Bhairav, who guards this local area. If you offer him some coconut, then he will let you proceed. The Vaishnavas said, I will offer 2 coconuts. He did so, and the wagons were able to go on their way. They arrived at Sri Giriraji and put the supplies into the store. They went to pay their respects to Sri Gosaiji. He said, "Oh, have you brought some supplies?" The merchant Vaishnava replied, "Yes, Maharaj, we brought 2 wagons together. We have put them into the store already." One of the other Vaishnavas who had been on the trip then piped up, "Oh Maharaj, yes, we brought the supplies, but that merchant Vaishnava did something very wrong." Sri Gosaiji asked him just what he had done. The Vaishnava sub said, "He offered 2 of our coconuts to Bhairav." Sri Gosaiji asked the merchant Vaishnava whether this was true. He replied, "Yes, I did offer 2 coconuts to that Bhairav in order to bring the supplies here." Sri Gosaiji asked him why he had acted in this way, since it constituted taking shelter in another or a principle contrary to the path of grace. The merchant Vaishnava explained, "O Maharaj, on the way the 2 wagons got stuck, and we could not move them. I asked a bystander why this was, and he told me that there was a deity called Bhairav nearby, and that the wagons could only be allowed to move if I offered him a coconut. Therefore, I simply offered those 2 coconuts. Then the wagons rolled on. O Maharaj, when a labourer performs any task, they have to be paid for it, at least 2 rupees. I gave 2 coconuts and the work was done. I paid the worker for his work. Where is the question of being disloyal here?" Sri Gosaiji smilingly said, "Oh yes, there is no disloyalty in paying a worker for their work." Bhav Prakash. Here it is taught that any act undertaken or decision made in direct relationship to the Lord does not constitute anyashray, or taking shelter in any other than the Lord himself. The Vaishnava merchant gave the coconut to Bhairav as payment for some work, not with the attitude that the Bhairav was divinely powerful in any way. This did not add up to anyashray. If he had given the Bhairav the coconut while regarding him as a powerful entity, then that would have indeed be anyashray. Ashray and anyashray are attitudes that depend on the consciousness within the heart. The actions themselves are not important. Part 1 continued. The merchant Vaishnava continued to live near Sri Giriraji and was responsible for bringing necessary supplies into Sri Nathji store. He always brought the very best quality supplies, and Sri Gosaiji was always pleased with him. Sri Gosaiji was always pleased with him. He would have the holy sight of Sri Gosaiji and served him all the time. Thus concludes Artik Varta 187, the story of the merchant Vaishnava who offered 2 coconuts to Bhairav. He was the recipient of Sri Gosaiji great grace and accomplished Vaishnava. There is no end ascend to his story. There is no ascend to his story. Varta 188, the story of a swan who lived at Mansarovar. Bhav Prakash. These 2 ego devotees of sattvic disposition in the eternal Leela. Their names are Hansa and Shiva. They manifest from Sridham and thus were personification of her divine loving sentiment. Part 1. One day, Sri Gosaiji was Pavanam. Part 1. One day, Sri Gosaiji, performing his sandhyat. Please excuse for the bad with the bad please excuse our bad quality of recording today. Part 1. One day, Sri Gosaiji was performing his Sandhya prayers by the Manasarovar lake. A swan couple flew down and began to drink water in presence of Sri Gosaiji. Sri Gosaiji blessed them with initiation with the Lord's name, and they began to live in trees by the lake. A hunter came there and tried to shoot the two of them with his arrows. He tried for the whole day, but he could not shoot them. He went home in the evening, and when he awoke, in the morning, he began to ponder as to why he had not been able to land his arrows on them. The two pigeons would roll in the dust of the feet of Vaishnavas who came there whilst on their tour of Vraja. The hunter observed that they were rolling in the dust of the Vaishnavas' feet, so he decided to dress up as a Vaishnava. He thought, "They will roll in the dust of my feet, and then I shall catch them." He donned the garb of a Vaishnava and mingled with the crowd of other Vaishnavas. When he saw the hunter, the male swan said to his partner, "Do you know this man?" Sri replied, "This is the one hunter, the one who was shooting at us with his arrows. He dresses up as a Vaishnava and comes with the Vaishnava group. How can we then roll in the dust of his feet?" The male swan then continued, "In our previous birth, we are a Brahmin couple. We were serving Sri Thakurji and feeding his Mahaprasad to Vaishnavas. We gave great respect to Brahmin Vaishnavas and fed them very nicely, but our service to other Vaishnavas was not ordinary. Due to this offensive behavior, we were reborn into these swan Vaishnavas. That hunter has come here pretending to be a Vaishnava. We will roll in the dust of his feet, and he will probably kill us. Let him do so. We will have to die one day anyway." They came to where the Vaishnavas were gathered, rolled in the dust of their feet, and then approached the hunter. He tried to catch them, but through the mere touch of their wings, his hand and heart were purified. He decided that he should now become a true Vaishnava. Through his contact with the swan couple, he indeed became a lovely Vaishnava. The swan couple would sit in the tops of the trees by Mansarovar. They would roll in the dust of the feet of any Vaishnava who came there. They did this for all of their lives. When, after some time, they left their swan bodies, they attained constant residence at the beloved's lotus feet. Bhav Prakash. The moral of this story is that one's intelligence is purified through the contact of Vaishnavas. Therefore, one should always seek their association. Whilst thinking of Vaishnavas, there should be absolutely no consideration of their caste or birth. A Vaishnava's form is highly divine. One should deeply respect even the lowliest of Vaishnavas and consider them to be greater than one's self. This is the very important principle stated in this tale. Thus concludes Varta 188, the story of this one couple who were the recipients of Sri Gosaiji's grace and accomplished Vaishnavas. There is no end to their tale. Aaj ke Anand ki jai ho. Sab Vaishnavan ko Jai Shri Krishna. Aaj ke Anand ki jai. Shiva Labhadisha ki jai. Jai Jai Shri Radhe.